few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest against the use of infinite magnitude as something completed, which is never permissible in mathematics. Infinity is merely a way of speaking. Allein die Schule des Lebens muss lehren, nur des erreichbar zu wollen, und des Gut nicht deswegen zu verschmähen, weil noch etwas Besseres denkbar ist. We must admit with humility that, while number is purely a product of our mind, space has a reality outside of our mind, so that we cannot prescribe its laws a priori. Sophie Germain proved to the world that even a woman can accomplish something in the most rigorous and abstract of sciences, and for that reason would well have deserved an honorary degree. The history of the apple is too absurd. Whether the apple fell or not, how can anyone believe that such a discovery could in that way be accelerated or retarded? Undoubtedly, the occurrence was something of this sort. There comes to Newton a stupid, importunate man, who asks him how he hit upon his great discovery. When Newton had convinced himself what a noodle he had to do with, and wanted to get rid of the man, he told him that an apple fell on his nose, and this made the matter quite clear to the man, and he went away satisfied. As is well known, the principle of virtual velocities transforms all statics into a mathematical assignment, and by D'Alembert's principle for dynamics, the latter is again reduced to statics. Although it is very much in order that in gradual training of science, and in the instruction of the individual, the easier precedes the more difficult, the simple precedes the more complicated, the special precedes the general, yet the min, once it has arrived at the higher standpoint, demands the reverse process whereby all statics appears only as a very special case of mechanics. I confess that Fermat's theorem as an isolated proposition has very little interest for me, for a multitude of such theorems can easily be set up, which one could neither prove nor disprove. But I have been stimulated by it to bring our again several old ideas for a great extension of the theory of numbers. Of course, this theory belongs to the things where one cannot predict to what extent one will succeed in reaching obscurely hovering distant goals. A happy star must also rule, and my situation and so manifold distracting affairs, of course, do not permit me to pursue such meditations as in the happy years 1796-1798, when I created the principal topics of my disquisitions arithmeticae. But I am convinced that if good fortune should do more than I expect, and make me successful in some advances in that theory, even the Fermat theorem will appear in it only as one of the least interesting corollaries. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest, what goes up must come down. You have to make the rules, not follow them. I have studied these things, you have not. No great discovery was ever made without a bold guess. What we know is a drop, what we don't know is an ocean. Nature is pleased with simplicity, and nature is no dummy. Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. Live your life as an exclamation rather than an explanation. Tact is the knack of making a point without making an enemy. Whence arises all that order and beauty we see in the world. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my greatest friend is truth. And to every action there is always an equal and opposite or contrary reaction. If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. To explain all nature is too difficult a task for any one man, or even for any one age. A man may imagine things that are false, but he can only understand things that are true. Truth is ever to be found in the simplicity, and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. Gravity explains the motions of the planets, but it cannot explain who sets the planets in motion. He who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God. To myself, I am only a child playing on the beach, while vast oceans of truth lie undiscovered before me. How came the bodies of animals to be contrived with so much art, and for what ends were their several parts? Sir Isaac Newton was asked how he discovered the law of gravity. He replied, by thinking about it all the time. If I have ever made any valuable discoveries, it has been due more to patient attention than to any other talent. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets and comets, could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all, and on account of his dominion he is wont to be called Lord God, Pi Alpha Nu Tau Omicron Kappa Rho Alpha Tau Omega Rho, or universal ruler. Was the eye contrived without skill in optics, and the ear without knowledge of sounds? And these things being rightly dispatched, does it not appear from phenomena that there is a being incorporeal, living, intelligent? Trials are medicines which our gracious and wise physician prescribes because we need them, and he proportions the frequency and weight of them to what the case requires. Let us trust his skill and thank him for his prescription. To explain all nature is too difficult a task for any one man, or even for any one age. 'Tis much better to do a little with certainty, and leave the rest for others that come after, than to explain all things by conjecture, without making sure of anything. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself in now, and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. God without dominion, providence, and final causes is nothing else but fate and nature. Blind metaphysical necessity, which is certainly the same always and everywhere, could produce no variety of things. All that diversity of natural things which we find suited to different times and places could arise from nothing but the ideas and will of a being necessarily existing. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest against the use of want what you can do, as you cannot do what you want. Learning never exhausts the mind. The smallest feline is a masterpiece. Art is never finished, only abandoned. The knowledge of all things is possible. I love those who can smile in trouble. The deeper the feeling, the greater the pain. Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence. The noblest pleasure is the joy of understanding. The painter has the universe in his mind and hands. It is easier to resist at the beginning than at the end. Nothing can be loved or hated unless it is first understood. The greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. I thought I was learning to live. I was only learning to die. One can have no smaller or greater mastery than mastery of oneself. As a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so life well used brings happy death. Study without desire spoils the memory, and it retains nothing that it takes in. The function of muscle is to pull and not to push, except in the case of the genitals and the tongue. Painting is poetry that is seen rather than felt, and poetry is painting that is felt rather than seen. There are 3 classes of people: those who see when they are shown, those who do not see. I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Being willing is not enough, we must do. A painter should begin every canvas with a wash of black, because all things in nature are dark except where exposed by the light. It had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return. I have from an early age abjured the use of meat, and the time will come when men such as I will look upon the murder of animals as they now look upon the murder of men. Principles for the development of a complete mind. Study the science of art. Study the art of science. Develop your senses, especially learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. One has no right to love or hate anything if one has not acquired a thorough knowledge of its nature. Great love springs from great knowledge of the beloved object, and if you know it but little, you will be able to love it only a little or not at all. I love those who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, but they whose heart is firm, and whose conscience approves their conduct, will pursue their principles unto death. If you are alone, you belong entirely to yourself. If you are accompanied by even one companion, you belong only half to yourself, or even less in proportion to the thoughtlessness of his conduct. And if you have more than one companion, you will fall more deeply into the same plight. You will never have a greater or lesser dominion than that over yourself. The height of a man's success is gauged by his self-mastery, the depth of his failure by his self-abandonment. And this law is the expression of eternal justice. He who cannot establish dominion over himself will have no dominion over others. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Einstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge. The more I study science, the more I believe in God. The only thing more dangerous than ignorance is arrogance. 3 great forces rule the world: stupidity, fear, and greed. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. We can't solve today's problems with the mentality that created them. Weak people revenge, strong people forgive, intelligent people ignore. The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits. Success comes from curiosity, concentration, perseverance, and self-criticism. The only thing more dangerous than ignorance is arrogance. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We cannot get to where we dream of being tomorrow unless we change our thinking today. Logic can take you from point A to point B. Imagination can take you wherever you want. Don't listen to the person who has the answers. Listen to the person who has the questions. God did not create evil. Just as darkness is the absence of light, evil is the absence of God. Knowledge is realizing that the street is one way. Wisdom is looking in both directions anyway. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Information is not knowledge. The only source of knowledge is experience. You need experience to gain wisdom. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is the language of the soul. Everything that exists in your life does so because of 2 things: something you did or something you didn't do. Be a loner. That gives you time to wonder, to search for the truth. Have holy curiosity. Make your life worth living. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is the language of the soul. Pay attention to your imagination, and you will discover all you need to be fulfilled. We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music. I am a determinist. As such, I do not believe in free will. Practically, I am, nevertheless, compelled to act as if freedom of the will existed. If I wish to live in a civilized community, I must act as if man is a responsible being. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Einstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says thoroughly conscious ignorance is the prelude to every real advance in science. I have the capacity of being more wicked than any example that man could set me. Faraday is, and must always remain, the father of that enlarged science of electromagnetism. I have looked into most philosophical systems, and I have seen that none will work without God. All the mathematical sciences are founded on relations between physical laws and laws of numbers. The true logic for this world is the calculus of probabilities, which takes account of the magnitude of the probability. Mathematicians may flatter themselves that they possess new ideas which mere human language is as yet unable to express. The only laws of matter are those that our minds must fabricate, and the only laws of mind are fabricated for it by matter. I have also a paper afloat with an electromagnetic theory of light, which, till I am convinced to the contrary, I hold to be great guns. It is a universal condition of the enjoyable that the mind must believe in the existence of a law, and yet have a mystery to move about in. In every branch of knowledge, the progress is proportional to the amount of facts on which to build, and therefore to the facility of obtaining data. The chief philosophical value of physics is that it gives the mind something distinct to lay hold of, which, if you don't, nature at once tells you you are wrong. It is of great advantage to the student of any subject to read the original memoirs on that subject, for science is always most completely assimilated when it is in the nascent state. The second law of thermodynamics has the same degree of truth as the statement that if you throw a tumblerful of water into the sea, you cannot get the same tumblerful of water out again. In science, it is when we take some interest in the great discoverers and their lives that it becomes endurable, and only when we begin to trace the development of ideas that it becomes fascinating. The student who uses home-made apparatus, which is always going wrong, often learns more than one who has the use of carefully adjusted instruments, to which he is apt to trust and which he dares not take to pieces. Science is incompetent to reason upon the creation of matter itself out of nothing. We have reached the utmost limit of our thinking faculties when we have admitted that, because matter cannot be eternal and self-existent, it must have been created. In speaking of the energy of the field, however, I wish to be understood literally. All energy is the same as mechanical energy, whether it exists in the form of motion or in that of elasticity or in any other form. The energy in electromagnetic phenomena is mechanical energy. What then is light according to the electromagnetic theory? It consists of alternate and opposite rapidly recurring transverse magnetic disturbances, accompanied with electric displacements, the direction of the electric displacement being at the right angles to the magnetic disturbance, and both at right angles to the direction of the ray. It was a great step in science when men became convinced that, in order to understand the nature of things, they must begin by asking, not whether a thing is good or bad, noxious or beneficial, but of what kind it is, and how much is there of it. Quality and quantity were then first recognized as the primary features to be observed in scientific inquiry. I think men of science as well as other men need to learn from Christ, and I think Christians whose minds are scientific are bound to study science, that their view of the glory of God may be as extensive as their being is capable. But I think that the results which each man arrives at in his attempts to harmonize his science with his Christianity ought not to be regarded as having any significance except to the man himself, and to him only for a time, and should not receive the stamp of a society. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Two magnitudes, whether commensurable or incommensurable, balance at distances reciprocally proportional to the magnitudes. The diameter of the earth is greater than the diameter of the moon, and the diameter of the sun is greater than the diameter of the earth. Those who claim to discover everything, but produce no proofs of the same, may be confuted as having actually pretended to discover the impossible. Any solid lighter than a fluid will, if placed in the fluid, be so far immersed that the weight of the solid will be equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. Equal weights at equal distances are in equilibrium, and equal weights at unequal distances are not in equilibrium, but incline towards the weight which is at the greater distance. It follows at once from the last proposition that the center of gravity of any triangle is at the intersection of the lines drawn from any two angles to the middle points of the opposite. Supposed to have been his cry, jumping naked from his bath and running in the streets, excited by a discovery about water displacement to solve a problem about the purity of a gold crown. Having been the discoverer of many splendid things, he is said to have asked his friends and relations that, after his death, they should place on his tomb a cylinder enclosing a sphere, writing on it the proportion of the containing solid to that which is contained. I am persuaded that this method for calculating the volume of a sphere will be of no little service to mathematics, for I foresee that once it is understood and established, it will be used to discover other theorems which have not yet occurred to me by other mathematicians, now living or yet unborn. Many people believe that the grains of sand are infinite in multitude. Others think that, although their number is not without limit, no number can ever be named which will be greater than the number of grains of sand. But I shall try to prove to you that among the numbers which I have named there are those which exceed the number of grains in a heap of sand, the size not only of the earth, but even of the universe. Archimedes to Eratosthenes' greeting. Certain things first became clear to me by a mechanical method, although they had to be demonstrated by geometry afterwards, because their investigation by the said method did not furnish an actual demonstration. But it is of course easier, when we have previously acquired by the method some knowledge of the questions, to supply the proof than it is to find it without any previous knowledge. Spoken of the young Archimedes. He was as much enchanted by the rudiments of algebra as he would have been if I had given him an engine worked by steam, with a methylated spirit lamp to heat the boiler. More enchanted, perhaps, for the engine would have got broken, and remaining always itself, would in any case have lost its charm, while the rudiments of algebra continued to grow and blossom in his mind with an unfailing luxuriance. Every day he made the discovery of something which seemed to him exquisitely beautiful. The new toy was inexhaustible in its potentialities. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. There is nothing without a reason. The present is big with the future. He who does not act does not exist. This is the best of all possible worlds. Why is there something rather than nothing? Every feeling is the perception of a truth. Nothing is necessitated whose opposite is possible. He who hasn't tasted bitter things hasn't earned sweet things. Music is a calculation which the soul makes unconsciously in secret. As far as we are capable of knowledge, we sin in neglecting to acquire it. Music is the hidden arithmetical exercise of a mind unconscious that it is calculating. Nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses, except the intellect itself. For all bodies are in perpetual flux like rivers, and parts are passing in and out of them continually. If you could blow the brain up to the size of a mill and walk about inside, you would not find consciousness. Imaginary numbers are a fine and wonderful resource of the divine intellect, almost an amphibian between being and non-being. For I hold that it is only when we can prove everything we assert that we understand perfectly the thing under consideration. Perceptions which are at present insensible may grow some day. Nothing is useless, and eternity provides great scope for change. There is nothing in the understanding which has not come from the senses, except the understanding itself, or the one who understands. The means of obtaining as much variety as possible, but with the greatest possible order, is the means of obtaining as much perfection as possible. It is unworthy of excellent men to lose hours like slaves in the labor of calculation, which could safely be relegated to anyone else if machines were used. I have so many ideas that may perhaps be of some use in time if others more penetrating than I go deeply into them someday, and join the beauty of their minds to the labor of mine. It is the knowledge of necessary and eternal truths that distinguishes us from the mere animals and gives us reason and the sciences, raising us to the knowledge of ourselves and of God. If geometry were as much opposed to our passions and present interests as is ethics, we should contest it and violate but little less, notwithstanding all the demonstrations of Euclid and Archimedes. The mind is not only capable of knowing innate ideas, but further of finding them in itself, and if it had only the simple capacity to receive knowledge, it would not be the source of necessary truths. The mind leans on innate principles every moment, but it does not come so easily to distinguish them and to represent them distinctly and separately, because that demands great attention to its acts, and the majority of people, little accustomed to think, has little of it. This interconnection or accommodation of all created things to each other, and each to all the others, brings it about that each simple substance has relations that express all the others, and consequently, that each simple substance is a perpetual, living mirror of the universe. Nature has established patterns originating in the return of events, but only for the most part. New illnesses flood the human race, so that no matter how many experiments you have done on corpses, you have not thereby imposed a limit on the nature of events, so that in the future they could not vary. It is true that the more we see some connection in what happens to us, the more we are confirmed in the opinion we have about the reality of our appearances. And it is also true that the more we examine our appearances closely, the more we find them well sequenced, as microscopes and other aids in making experiments have shown us. And just as the same town, when looked at from different sides, appears quite different and is, as it were, multiplied in perspective, so also it happens that because of the infinite number of simple substances, it is as if there were as many different universes, which are however but different perspective representations of a single universe, form the different point of view of each monad. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. Computers are like humans. They do everything except think. You don't have to be responsible for the world that you're in. Truth is much too complicated to allow anything but approximations. All stable processes we shall predict. All unstable processes we shall control. Young man, in mathematics you don't understand things. You just get used to them. There's no sense in being precise when you don't even know what you're talking about. There is no point in being precise if you do not even know what you are talking about. With 4 parameters I can fit an elephant, and with 5 I can make him wiggle his trunk. There probably is a God. Many things are easier to explain if there is than if there isn't. I am thinking about something much more important than bombs. I am thinking about computers. Problems are often stated in vague terms, because it is quite uncertain what the problems really are. Anyone who attempts to generate random numbers by deterministic means is, of course, living in a state of sin. I would like to make a confession which may seem immoral. I do not believe absolutely in Hilbert space anymore. If you tell me precisely what it is a machine cannot do, then I can always make a machine which will do just that. If people do not believe that mathematics is simple, it is only because they do not realize how complicated life is. When we talk mathematics, we may be discussing a secondary language built on the primary language of the nervous system. Technological possibilities are irresistible to man. If man can go to the moon, he will. If he can control the climate, he will. If one has really technically penetrated a subject, things that previously seemed in complete contrast might be purely mathematical transformations of each other. You insist that there is something a machine cannot do. If you tell me precisely what it is a machine cannot do, then I can always make a machine which will do just that. It is just as foolish to complain that people are selfish and treacherous as it is to complain that the magnetic field does not increase unless the electric field has a curl. Both are laws of nature. Science as well as technology will in the near and in the farther future increasingly turn from problems of intensity, substance, and energy to problems of structure, organization, information, and control. The total subject of mathematics is clearly too broad for any of us. I do not think that any mathematician since Gauss has covered it uniformly and fully. Even Hilbert did not, and all of us are of considerably lesser width, quite apart from the question of depth, than Hilbert. The calculus was the first achievement of modern mathematics, and it is difficult to overestimate its importance. I think it defines more unequivocally than anything else the inception of modern mathematics, and the system of mathematical analysis, which is its logical development, still constitutes the greatest technical advance in exact thinking. John von Neumann's remarks as keynote speaker at the first national meeting of the Association for Computing Machinery, 1947, as quoted in. By and large, it is uniformly true in mathematics that there is a time lapse between a mathematical discovery and the moment when it is useful, and that this lapse of time can be anything from 30 to 100 years, in some cases even more, and that the whole system seems to function without any direction, without any reference to usefulness, and without any desire to do things which are useful. The sciences do not try to explain, they hardly even try to interpret, they mainly make models. By a model is meant a mathematical construct which, with the addition of certain verbal interpretations, describes observed phenomena. The justification of such a mathematical construct is solely and precisely that it is expected to work, that is, correctly to describe phenomena from a reasonably wide area. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. Science advances one funeral at a time. Truth never triumphs, its opponents just die out. The scientist needs an artistically creative imagination. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. There is no matter as such. Mind is the matrix of all matter. Every advance in knowledge brings us face to face with the mystery of our own being. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. It was not by accident that the greatest thinkers of all ages were deeply religious souls. Experiment is the only means of knowledge at our disposal. Everything else is poetry, imagination. What seems today inconceivable will appear one day, from a higher standpoint, quite simple and harmonious. There can never be any real opposition between religion and science, for the one is the complement of the other. A new truth always has to contend with many difficulties. If it were not so, it would have been discovered much sooner. Whence come I and whither go I? That is the great unfathomable question, the same for every one of us. Science has no answer to it. In all my research, I have never come across matter. To me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because, in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Anybody who has been seriously engaged in scientific work of any kind realizes that over the entrance to the gates of the temple of science are written the words, "Ye must have faith." A scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die, and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. Science does not mean an idle resting upon a body of certain knowledge. It means unresting endeavor and continually progressing development toward an end, which the poetic intuition may apprehend, but which the intellect can never fully grasp. The highest court is in the end one's own conscience and conviction. That goes for you and for Einstein and every other physicist, and before any science there is first of all belief. For me, it is belief in a complete lawfulness in everything that happens. New scientific ideas never spring from a communal body, however organized, but rather from the head of an individually inspired researcher, who struggles with his problems in lonely thought and unites all his thought on one single point, which is his whole world for the moment. Modern physics has taught us that the nature of any system cannot be discovered by dividing it into its component parts and studying each part by itself. We must keep our attention fixed on the whole and on the interconnection between the parts. The same is true of our intellectual life. It is impossible to make a clear cut between science, religion, and art. The whole is never equal simply to the sum of its various parts. There can never be any real opposition between religion and science, for the one is the complement of the other. Every serious and reflective person realizes, I think, that the religious element in his nature must be recognized and cultivated if all the powers of the human soul are to act together in perfect balance and harmony. And indeed, it was not by accident that the greatest thinkers of all ages were deeply religious souls. As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When an experiment disproving a prediction is discovery. It does not say in the Bible that all laws of nature are expressible linearly. Never underestimate the joy people derive from hearing something they already know. When asked what he meant by a miracle, anything with a probability of less than 20%. Young man, if I could remember the names of these particles, I would have been a botanist. It is not good to try to stop knowledge from going forward. Ignorance is never better than knowledge. Experimental confirmation of a prediction is merely a measurement. An experiment disproving a prediction is a discovery. On what characteristics Nobel Prize-winning physicists had in common, I cannot think of a single one, not even intelligence. Before I came here, I was confused about this subject. Having listened to your lecture, I am still confused, but on a higher level. Whatever nature has in store for mankind, unpleasant as it may be, men must accept, for ignorance is never better than knowledge. I remember my friend Johnny von Neumann used to say, with 4 parameters I can fit an elephant, and with 5 I can make him wiggle his trunk. There are 2 possible outcomes. If the result confirms the hypothesis, then you've made a measurement. If the result is contrary to the hypothesis, then you've made a discovery. The fundamental point in fabricating a chain reacting machine is of course to see to it that each fission produces a certain number of neutrons, and some of these neutrons will again produce fission. Where is everybody? Humans could theoretically colonize the galaxy in 1 million years or so, and if they could, astronauts from older civilizations could do the same. So why haven't they come to Earth? Some people stick with the traditional, feeling struck by the epic beauty or blown away by the insane scale of the universe. Personally, I go for the old existential meltdown followed by acting weird for the next half hour. But everyone feels something. One might be led to question whether the scientists acted wisely in presenting the statesmen of the world with this appalling problem. Actually, there was no choice. Once basic knowledge is acquired, any attempt at preventing its fruition would be as futile as hopping to stop the Earth from revolving around the sun. Although the problem of transmuting chemical elements into each other is much older than a satisfactory definition of the very concept of chemical element, it is well known that the first and most important step towards its solution was made only 19 years ago by the late Lord Rutherford, who started the method of the nuclear bombardments. The fact that no limits exist to the destructiveness of this weapon, the super, i.e. the hydrogen bomb, makes its very existence, and the knowledge of its construction, a danger to humanity as a whole. It is necessarily an evil thing considered in any light. For these reasons, we believe it important for the President of the United States to tell the American public and the world what we think is wrong on fundamental ethical principles to initiate the development of such a weapon. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act. Machines take me by surprise with great frequency. Codes are a puzzle, a game just like any other game. No, I'm not interested in developing a powerful brain. My little computer said such a funny thing this morning. Science is a differential equation. Religion is a boundary condition. If a machine is expected to be infallible, it cannot also be intelligent. Programming is a skill best acquired by practice and example, rather than from books. We are not interested in the fact that the brain has the consistency of cold porridge. We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done. Unless in communicating with it one says exactly what one means, trouble is bound to result. We may hope that machines will eventually compete with men in all purely intellectual fields. Sometimes it is the people know one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine. The original question, can machines think, I believe to be too meaningless to deserve discussion. Do you know why people like violence? It is because it feels good. Humans find violence deeply satisfying. A computer would deserve to be called intelligent if it could deceive a human into believing that it was human. A man provided with paper, pencil, and rubber, and subject to strict discipline, is in effect a universal machine. Up to a point, it is better to just let the snags bugs be there than to spend such time in design that there are none. One day ladies will take their computers for walks in the park and tell each other, my little computer said such a funny thing this morning. The idea behind digital computers may be explained by saying that these machines are intended to carry out any operations which could be done by a human computer. Do you know why people like violence? It is because it feels good. Humans find violence deeply satisfying, but remove the satisfaction and the act becomes hollow. Mathematical reasoning may be regarded rather schematically as the exercise of a combination of two faculties, which we may call intuition and ingenuity. I believe that at the end of the century, the use of words and general educated opinion will have altered so much that one will be able to speak of machines thinking without expecting to be contradicted. Instead of trying to produce a program to simulate the adult mind, why not rather try to produce one which simulates the child's? If this were then subjected to an appropriate course of education, one would obtain the adult brain. It seems probable that once the machine thinking method had started, it would not take long to outstrip our feeble powers. They would be able to converse with each other to sharpen their wits. At some stage, therefore, we should have to expect the machines to take control. Mathematical reasoning may be regarded rather schematically as the exercise of a combination of two facilities, which we may call intuition and ingenuity. The activity of the intuition consists in making spontaneous judgments, which are not the result of conscious trains of reasoning. The exercise of ingenuity in mathematics consists in aiding the intuition through suitable arrangements of propositions, and perhaps geometrical figures or drawings. There is, however, one feature that I would like to suggest should be incorporated in the machines, and that is a random element. Each machine should be supplied with a tape bearing a random series of figures, e.g., 0 and 1 in equal quantities, and this series of figures should be used in the choices made by the machine. This would result in the behavior of the machine not being by any means completely determined by the experiences to which it was subjected, and would have some valuable uses when one was experimenting with it. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, logic sometimes creates monsters. It is by logic that we prove, but by intuition that we discover. Mathematics is the art of giving the same name to different things. It is through science that we prove, but through intuition that we discover. Thought is only a flash in the middle of a long night, but this flash means everything. Guessing before proving. Need I remind you that it is so that all important discoveries have been made? The scientist's brain, which is but a corner of the universe, will never be able to contain the entire universe. Experiment is the sole source of truth. It alone can teach us something new. It alone can give us certainty. To doubt everything and to believe everything are 2 equally convenient solutions. Each saves us from thinking. Pure logic could never lead us to anything but tautologies. It can create nothing new. Not from it alone can any science issue. If we wish to foresee the future of mathematics, our proper course is to study the history and present condition of the science. It is by logic that we prove, but by intuition that we discover. To know how to criticize is good, to know how to create is better. In one word, to draw the rule from experience, one must generalize. This is a necessity that imposes itself on the most circumspect observer. Physicists believe that the Gaussian law has been proved in mathematics, while mathematicians think that it was experimentally established in physics. The mathematician does not study pure mathematics because it is useful. He studies it because he delights in it, and he delights in it because it is beautiful. The scientist must set in order. Science is built up with facts, as a house is with stones. But a collection of facts is no more a science than a heap of stones is a house. A reality completely independent of the spirit that conceives it, sees it, or feels it, is an impossibility. A world so external as that, even if it existed, would be forever inaccessible to us. Most striking at first is this appearance of sudden illumination, a manifest sign of long, unconscious prior work. The role of this unconscious work in mathematical invention appears to me incontestable. Why is it that showers and even storms seem to come by chance, so that many people think it quite natural to pray for rain or fine weather, though they would consider it ridiculous to ask for an eclipse by prayer? Mathematicians do not deal in objects, but in relations between objects. Thus, they are free to replace some objects by others so long as the relations remain unchanged. Content to them is irrelevant. They are interested in form only. Thinking must never submit itself, neither to a dogma, nor to a party, nor to a passion, nor to an interest, nor to a preconceived idea, nor to whatever it may be if not to facts themselves, because, for it, to submit would be to cease to be. La pensée ni doit jamais si soumeter, nia un dogme, nia un party, nia un passion, nia un interert, nia un idée préconçue, nia quoique soit, si en est aux fates humerms parce que pour elle si soumeter, si serait cessar d'être. The aim of mathematical physics is not only to facilitate for the physicist the numerical calculation of certain constants or the integration of certain differential equations. It is besides, it is above all, to reveal to him the hidden harmony of things in making him see them in a new way. How is it that there are so many minds that are incapable of understanding mathematics, the skeleton of our understanding, and actually they are the majority? We have here a problem that is not easy of solution, but yet must engage the attention of all who wish to devote themselves to education. The philosophers make still another objection. What you gain in rigor, they say, you lose in objectivity. You can rise toward your logical ideal only by cutting the bonds which attach you to reality. Your science is infallible, but it can only remain so by imprisoning itself in an ivory tower and renouncing all relation with the external world. From this seclusion it must go out when it would attempt the slightest application. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession. The heart has its reasons which reason knows not. To ridicule philosophy is really to philosophize. You always admire what you really don't understand. Kind words don't cost much, yet they accomplish much. Dull minds are never either intuitive or mathematical. I would prefer an intelligent hell to a stupid paradise. To make light of philosophy is to be a true philosopher. When one does not love too much, one does not love enough. Little things comfort us because little things distress us. It is man's natural sickness to believe that he possesses the truth. The last thing one discovers in composing a work is what to put first. Do you wish people to think well of you? Don't speak well of yourself. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. I made this letter very long, because I did not have the leisure to make it shorter. I have only made this letter longer because I have not had the time to make it shorter. Il n'est pas certain que tout soit incertain. It is not certain that everything is uncertain. Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction. Curiosity is only vanity. We usually only want to know something so that we can talk about it. Man's sensitivity to the little things and insensitivity to the greatest are the signs of a strange disorder. We are generally the better persuaded by the reasons we discover ourselves than by those given to us by others. Man is equally incapable of seeing the nothingness from which he emerges and the infinity in which he is engulfed. I lay it down as a fact that if all men knew what others say of them, there would not be 4 friends in the world. Truth is so obscure in these times, and falsehood so established, that, unless we love the truth, we cannot know it. The heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of. We know the truth not only by the reason, but by the heart. The greater intellect one has, the more originality one finds in men. Ordinary persons find no difference between men. People almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. Clarity of mind means clarity of passion, too. This is why a great and clear mind loves ardently and sees distinctly what it loves. There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of each man which cannot be satisfied by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ. If we submit everything to reason, our religion will be left with nothing mysterious or supernatural. If we offend the principles of reason, our religion will be absurd and ridiculous. There are 2 equally dangerous extremes: to exclude reason, to admit nothing but reason. All men seek happiness. This is without exception. Whatever different means they employ, they all tend to this end. The cause of some going to war and of others avoiding it is the same desire in both, attended with different views. The will never takes the least step but to this object. This is the motive of every action of every man, even of those who hang themselves. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is, logic is the foundation of the certainty of all the knowledge we acquire. Madam, I have just come from a country where people are hanged if they talk. Nothing takes place in the world whose meaning is not that of some maximum or minimum. It is mathematics that protects us from the deception of the senses and teaches us the difference between appearance and truth. Mathematicians have tried in vain to this day to discover some order in the sequence of prime numbers, and we have reason to believe that it is a mystery into which the human mind will never penetrate. The kind of knowledge which is supported only by observations and is not yet proved must be carefully distinguished from the truth. It is gained by induction, as we usually say. Yet we have seen cases in which mere induction led to error. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Einstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there. Masked I advance. I think, therefore I am. He who hid well lived well. Doubt is the origin of wisdom. Conquer yourself rather than the world. There is nothing more ancient than the truth. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. But in my opinion, all things in nature occur mathematically. Except our own thoughts, there is nothing absolutely in our power. It is not enough to have a good mind. The main thing is to use it well. In order to improve the mind, we ought less to learn than to contemplate. Divide each difficulty into as many parts as is feasible and necessary to resolve it. The greatest minds are capable of the greatest vices, as well as of the greatest virtues. Each problem that I solved became a rule, which served afterwards to solve other problems. The reading of all good books is like conversation with the finest men of past centuries. To know what people really think, pay attention to what they do, rather than what they say. It is only prudent never to place complete confidence in that, by which we have even once been deceived. At last I will devote myself sincerely, and without reservation, to the general demolition of my opinions. You just keep pushing, you just keep pushing. I made every mistake that could be made, but I just kept pushing. To live without philosophizing is in truth the same as keeping the eyes closed, without attempting to open them. I desire to live in peace, and to continue the life I have begun under the motto, to live well, you must live unseen. In order to seek truth, it is necessary once in the course of our life to doubt, as far as possible, of all things. Common sense is the most widely shared commodity in the world, for every man is convinced that he is well supplied with it. Let whoever can do so deceive me, he will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I continue to think I am something. If you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt, as far as possible, all things. For I found myself embarrassed with so many doubts and errors, that it seemed to me that the effort to instruct myself had no effect other than the increasing discovery of my own ignorance. And thus, the actions of life often not allowing any delay, it is a truth very certain that, when it is not in our power to determine the most true opinions, we ought to follow the most probable. I suppose, therefore, that all things I see are illusions. I believe that nothing has ever existed of everything my lying memory tells me. I think I have no senses. I believe that body, shape, extension, motion, location are functions. What is there then that can be taken as true? Perhaps only this one thing, that nothing at all is certain. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Einstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. Give me blood, and I promise you freedom. Those who say that the practice of science is not possible in Bengali either do not know Bengali or do not understand science. The true laboratory is the mind, where behind illusions we uncover the laws of truth. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which be approximately right rather than exactly wrong. If we are going to make a mark, key 21, it might as well be a meaningful one. Numerical quantities focus on expected values, graphical summaries on unexpected values. The best thing about being a statistician is that you get to play in everyone's backyard. The greatest value of a picture is when it forces us to notice what we never expected to see. It's better to solve the right problem approximately than to solve the wrong problem exactly. This is my favorite part about analytics, taking boring flat data and bringing it to life through visualization. There is no data that can be displayed in a pie chart that cannot be displayed better in some other type of chart. An approximate answer to the right problem is worth a good deal more than an exact answer to an approximate problem. To be able to say that if we change our point of view in the following way, things are simpler is always a gain. I know of no person or group that is taking nearly adequate advantage of the graphical potentialities of the computer. When communicating results to non-technical types, there is nothing better than a clear visualization to make your point. The combination of some data and an aching desire for an answer does not ensure that a reasonable answer can be extracted from a given body of data. Far better an approximate answer to the right question, which is often vague, than the exact answer to the wrong question, which can always be made precise. All we know about the world teaches us that the effects of A and B are always different, in some decimal place. For any A and B, thus asking, are the effects different, is foolish. In a single sentence, the moral is, admit that complexity always increases, first from the model you fit to the data, thence to the model you use to think about and plan about the experiment and its analysis, and thence to the true situation. In a world in which the price of calculation continues to decrease rapidly, but the price of theorem proving continues to hold steady or increase, elementary economics indicates that we ought to spend a larger and larger fraction of our time on calculation. Visualization is often used for evil, twisting insignificant data changes and making them look meaningful. Don't do that crap if you want to be my friend. Present results clearly and honestly. If something isn't working, those reviewing results need to know. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest against the use of infinite magnitude as something completed, which is never permissible in math. Classes will dull your mind, destroy the potential for authentic creativity. The only thing greater than the power of the mind is the courage of the heart. The best for the group comes when everyone in the group does what's best for himself and the group. As you will find in multivariable calculus, there is often a number of solutions for any given problem. Perhaps it is good to have a beautiful mind, but an even greater gift is to discover a beautiful heart. I cannot waste time in these classes and these books, memorizing the weak assumptions of lesser mortals. Because the ideas I had about supernatural beings came to me the same way that my mathematical ideas did, so I took them seriously. What truly is logic? Who decides reason? It is only in the mysterious equations of love that any logic or reason can be found. It is better to have been, than not to have been, than to have been nothing at all. What truly is logic? Who decides reason? It is only in the mysterious equations of love that any logic or reason can be found. I've made the most important discovery of my life. It's only in the mysterious equation of love that any logical reasons can be found. I'm only here tonight because of you. You're the only reason I am. You're all my reasons, tilde. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is, say what you know, do what you must, come what may. It is impossible to be a mathematician without being a poet in soul. It seems to me that the poet has only to perceive that which others do not perceive, to look deeper than others look, and the mathematician must do the same thing. Many who have never had an opportunity of knowing any more about mathematics confound it with arithmetic and consider it an arid science. In reality, however, it is a science which requires a great amount of imagination. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest against the primary causes are unknown to us, but are subject to simple and constant laws, which may be discovered by observation, the study of them being the object of natural philosophy. Heat, like gravity, penetrates every substance of the universe. Its rays occupy all parts of space. The object of our work is to set forth the mathematical laws which this element obeys. The theory of heat will hereafter form one of the most important branches of general physics. The deep study of nature is the most fruitful source of mathematical discoveries. By offering to research a definite end, this study has the advantage of excluding vague questions and useless calculations. Besides, it is a sure means of forming analysis itself, and of discovering the elements which it most concerns us to know, and which natural science ought always to conserve. There cannot be a language more universal and more simple, more free from errors and obscurities, more worthy to express the invariable relations of all natural things than mathematics. It interprets all phenomena by the same language, as if to attest the unity and simplicity of the plan of the universe, and to make still more evident that unchangeable order which presides over all natural causes. The integrals which we have obtained are not only general expressions which satisfy the differential equation, they represent in the most distinct manner the natural effect which is the object of the phenomenon. When this condition is fulfilled, the integral is, properly speaking, the equation of the phenomenon. It expresses clearly the character and progress of it, in the same manner as the finite equation of a line or curved surface makes known all the properties of those forms. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher, unity is the law of God. Evolution is the law of life. Lust weakens both body and mind. Number is the law of the universe. Know thyself, and thou wilt know the universe. A fool is known by his speech, and a wise man by silence. In anger we should refrain both from speech and action. You should make great things, not promising great things. Learn to be silent. Let your quiet mind listen and absorb. It is better to be silent than to dispute with the ignorant. None can be free who is a slave to, and ruled by, his passions. Educate the children, and it won't be necessary to punish the men. The wise man should be prepared for everything that does not lie within his control. The oldest, shortest words, yes and no, are those which require the most thought. Numbers have a way of taking a man by the hand and leading him down the path of reason. Love that shines from within cannot be darkened by obstacles of the world of consequences. The highest goal of music is to connect one's soul to their divine nature, not entertainment. If you're asked, what is the silence? Respond, it is the first stone of the wisdom's temple. Don't try to cover your mistakes with false words. Rather, correct your mistakes with examination. The experience of life in a finite, limited body is specifically for the purpose of discovering and manifesting supernatural existence. Do not go to bed until you have gone over the day 3 times in your mind. What wrong did I do? What good did I accomplish? What did I forget to do? If you have a wounded heart, touch it as little as you would an injured eye. There are only 2 remedies for the suffering of the soul, hope and patience. The soul of man is divided into 3 parts: intelligence, reason, and passion. Intelligence and passion are possessed by other animals, but reason by man alone. As long as man continues to be the ruthless destroyer of lower living beings, he will never know health or peace. For as long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other. Hate and fear breed a poison in the blood, which, if continued, affects eyes, ears, nose, and the organs of digestion. Therefore, it is not wise to hear and remember the unkind things others might say about you. We come from God, as the tree from the root and the stream from the spring. That's why we should always be in contact with him, as the trunk from the root. Because the stream dries up when it is separated from the spring, and the tree dies when it is uprooted. Each celestial body, in fact each and every atom, produces a particular sound on account of its movement, its rhythm or vibration. All these sounds and vibrations form a universal harmony in which each element, while having its own function and character, contributes to the whole. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher, nature loves simplicity and unity. Where there is matter, there is geometry. Why are things as they are and not otherwise? Without proper experiments, I conclude nothing. Geometry is the archetype of the beauty of the world. Do we ask what profit the little bird hopes for in singing? Science is the process of thinking God's thoughts after him. God is the kind creator who brought forth nature out of nothing. Truth is the daughter of time, and I feel no shame in being her midwife. O telescope, instrument of much knowledge, more precious than any scepter. Once miracles are admitted, every scientific explanation is out of the question. I believe only and alone in the service of Jesus Christ. In him is all refuge and solace. I much prefer the sharpest criticism of a single intelligent man to the thoughtless approval of the masses. The roads by which men arrive at their insights into celestial matters seem to me almost as worthy of wonder as those matters in themselves. My greatest desire is that I may perceive the God whom I find everywhere in the external world, in like manner also within and inside myself. I had the intention of becoming a theologian, but now I see how God is, by my endeavors, also glorified in astronomy, for the heavens declare the glory of God. Since we astronomers are priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it befits us to be thoughtful, not of the glory of our minds, but rather, above all else, of the glory of God. The heavenly motions are nothing but a continuous song for several voices, perceived not by the ear but by the intellect, a figured music which sets landmarks in the immeasurable flow of time. The chief aim of all investigations of the external world should be to discover the rational order and harmony which has been imposed on it by God, and which he revealed to us in the language of mathematics. We do not ask for what useful purpose the birds do sing, for song is their pleasure since they were created for singing. Similarly, we ought not to ask why the human mind troubles to fathom the secrets of the heavens. Great is God our Lord, great is his power, and there is no end to his wisdom. Praise him, you heavens, glorify him, sun and moon, and you planets. For out of him and through him and in him are all things. We know, oh, so little. To him be the praise, the honor, and the glory from eternity to eternity. The wisdom of the Lord is infinite, as are also his glory and his power. Ye heavens, sing his praises. Sun, moon, and planets, glorify him in your ineffable language. Praise him, celestial harmonies, and all ye who can comprehend them. And thou, my soul, praise thy Creator. It is by him and in him that all exist. It is a right, yes, a duty, to search in cautious manner for the numbers, sizes, and weights, the norms for everything God has created. For he himself has let man take part in the knowledge of these things. For these secrets are not of the kind whose research should be forbidden. Rather, they are set before our eyes like a mirror, so that, by examining them, we observe to some extent the goodness and wisdom of the Creator. I am stealing the golden vessels of the Egyptians to build a tabernacle to my God from them, far, far away from the boundaries of Egypt. If you forgive me, I shall rejoice. If you are enraged with me, I shall bear it. See, I cast the die and I write the book. Whether it is to be read by the people of the present or of the future makes no difference. Let it await its reader for 100 years, if God himself has stood ready for 6,000 years for one to study him. The heavenly bodies are nothing but a continuous song for several voices, perceived by the intellect, not by the ear, a music which sets landmarks in the immeasurable flow of time. It is therefore no longer surprising that man, in imitation of his Creator, has at last discovered the art of figured song, which was unknown to the ancients. Man wanted to reproduce the continuity of cosmic time, to obtain a sample test of the delight of the divine Creator in his works, and to partake of his joy by making music in the imitation of God. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. The general laws of nature are not, for the most part, immediate objects of perception. It is not of the essence of mathematics to be conversant with the ideas of number and quantity. That language is an instrument of human reason, and not merely a medium for the expression of thought, is a truth generally admitted. Of the many forms of false culture, a premature converse with abstractions is perhaps the most likely to prove fatal to the growth of a masculine vigor of intellect. No matter how correct a mathematical theorem may appear to be, one ought never to be satisfied that there was not something imperfect about it until it also gives the impression of being beautiful. Probability is expectation founded upon partial knowledge. A perfect acquaintance with all the circumstances affecting the occurrence of an event would change expectation into certainty, and leave neither room nor demand for a theory of probabilities. To unfold the secret laws and relations of those high faculties of thought by which all beyond the merely perceptive knowledge of the world and of ourselves is attained or matured, is an object which does not stand in need of commendation to a rational mind. I am now about to set seriously to work upon preparing for the press an account of my theory of logic and probabilities, which in its present state I look upon as the most valuable, if not the only valuable contribution that I have made or am likely to make to science, and the thing by which I would desire, if at all, to be remembered hereafter. I presume that few who have paid any attention to the history of the mathematical analysis will doubt that it has been developed in a certain order, or that that order has been, to a great extent, necessary, being determined, either by steps of logical deduction, or by the successive introduction of new ideas and conceptions, when the time for their evolution had arrived. I am fully assured that no general method for the solution of questions in the theory of probabilities can be established which does not explicitly recognize not only the special numerical bases of the science, but also those universal laws of thought which are the basis of all reasoning. and which, whatever they may be as to their essence, are at least mathematical as to their form. It follows that the word probability, in its mathematical acceptance, has reference to the state of our knowledge of the circumstances under which an event may happen or fail. With the degree of information we possess concerning the circumstances of an event, the reason we have to think that it will occur, or, to use a single term, our expectation of it will vary. Probability is the expectation founded upon partial knowledge. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but an equation means nothing to me unless it expresses a thought of God. No, it is a very interesting number. It is the smallest number expressible as a sum of 2 cubes in 2 different ways. To preserve my brains I want food, and this is now my first consideration. Any sympathetic letter from you will be helpful to me here to get a scholarship. While asleep I had an unusual experience. There was a red screen formed by flowing blood, as it were. I was observing it. Suddenly a hand began to write on the screen. I became all attention. That hand wrote a number of elliptic integrals. They stuck to my mind. As soon as I woke up, I committed them to writing. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is, which had to be demonstrated, which was required to be proved. There is no royal road to geometry. 2. A number is a multiple composed of units. The laws of nature are but the mathematical thoughts of God. What has been affirmed without proof can also be denied without proof. 1 and unit is that by virtue of which each of the things that exist is called one. Let it be granted that things which are equal to the same thing are equal to one another. Handwriting is a spiritual designing, even though it appears by means of a material instrument. A straight line is said to have been cut in extreme and mean ratio when, as the whole line is to the greater segment, so is the greater to the lesser. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something, I wish to God these calculations had been executed by steam. Errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. Perhaps it would be better for science that all criticism should be avowed. The economy of human time is the next advantage of machinery in manufactures. In mathematics, we have long since drawn the rein and given over a hopeless race. What is there in a name? It is merely an empty basket until you put something into it. Another mode of accumulating power arises from lifting a weight and then allowing it to fall. As soon as an analytical engine exists, it will necessarily guide the future course of science. I have no desire to write my own biography, as long as I have strength and means to do better work. At each increase of knowledge, as well as on the contrivance of every new tool, human labor becomes abridged. Whenever the work is itself light, it becomes necessary, in order to economize time, to increase the velocity. An object is frequently not seen, from not knowing how to see it, rather than from any defect of the organ of vision. For one person who is blessed with the power of invention, many will always be found who have the capacity of applying principles. A young man passes from our public schools to the universities, ignorant almost of the elements of every branch of useful knowledge. If we look at the fact, we shall find that the great inventions of the age are not, with us at least, always produced in universities. The first steps in the path of discovery, and the first approximate measures, are those which add most to the existing knowledge of mankind. Perhaps the most important principle on which the economy of a manufacture depends is the division of labor amongst the persons who perform the work. You will be able to appreciate the influence of such an engine on the future progress of science. I live in a country which is incapable of estimating it. The errors which arise from the absence of facts are far more numerous and more durable than those which result from unsound reasoning respecting true data. The quantity of meaning compressed into small space by algebraic signs is another circumstance that facilitates the reasonings we are accustomed to carry on by their aid. In turning from the smaller instruments in frequent use to the larger and more important machines, the economy arising from the increase of velocity becomes more striking. The whole of the developments and operations of analysis are now capable of being executed by machinery. As soon as an analytical engine exists, it will necessarily guide the future course of science. On 2 occasions I have been asked, "Pray, Mr. Babbage, if you put into the machine wrong figures, will the right answers come out?" I am not able rightly to apprehend the kind of confusion of ideas that could provoke such a question. Whenever a man can get hold of numbers, they are invaluable. If correct, they assist in informing his own mind, but they are still more useful in deluding the minds of others. Numbers are the masters of the weak, but the slaves of the strong. Propose to an Englishman any principle, or any instrument, however admirable, and you will observe that the whole effort of the English mind is directed to find a difficulty, a defect, or an impossibility in it. If you speak to him of a machine for peeling a potato, he will pronounce it impossible. If you peel a potato with it before his eyes, he will declare it useless, because it will not slice a pineapple.